There is a cow standing in a field somewhere near you right now. And if you drove past her, you would not give her a second thought. She is the animal we use as a byword for dull. Placid, empty, chewing, blank. A thing that turns grass into milk and stares at traffic. We have looked at this animal for 10,000 years and decided there is simply nothing going on in there. We could not have been more wrong. That cow has a best friend, and being separated from her spikes her heart rate and her stress hormones. She holds grudges against people who have hurt her, sometimes for years. She feels a jolt of something like joy when she solves a problem. She is, at this moment, very possibly aligning her body with the magnetic field of the earth without knowing why. And the animal she descends from was a 2-meter monster that could kill a wolf, that human beings genuinely feared. The cow is not a simple animal.
She is a deeply social, emotional, problem-solving creature that we spent 10,000 years quietly rebuilding, and who, in return, rewrote our species from the inside. Today, 100 facts about the most underestimated animal on Earth. This channel exists to drag ordinary animals into the light and show you what was actually there the whole time. So if that sounds good, the subscribe button is waiting. Let's start with the mind. Fact 1. Cows have best friends. In research led by Krista McLennan, first reported around 2011 and developed through her doctoral work, cattle formed specific, preferred social bonds with particular individuals, not just a vague liking for company, but a chosen companion they sought out again and again. Fact 2. And the bond is measurable in the body. When a cow was penned with her preferred partner, her heart rate was significantly lower than when she was penned alone or with a stranger. Friendship, for a cow, is physically calming.
Fact 3. Separate a cow from her closest companion, and the reverse happens. Her heart rate climbs and her stress hormone cortisol rises. She is not mildly inconvenienced. She is distressed, in the same measurable way we are when we lose someone. And the effect is specific to the friend. Being penned with a random, unfamiliar cow does almost nothing to soothe her. It is not company she wants. It is that particular animal. Fact 4. This is the same standard of evidence used to establish pair bonding in primates and in crows. By that bar, the friendship of cows is not sentimental projection. It is a documented biological phenomenon. Fact 5. Cows hold grudges. They remember individuals who have treated them badly, human or bovine, and they behave differently toward them long afterward, avoiding or acting warily around someone who once caused them pain or fear. A rough encounter with a particular handler can make a cow tense every time that person reappears. Months later, while she stays relaxed with everyone else. Fact 6. And they remember kindness too, recognizing and preferring people who handle them gently. A cow is quietly keeping a ledger of who has been good to her and who has not. Fact 7. Now the fact that reframes the whole animal. Cows have what scientists call a eureka moment. In a landmark 2004 study by Kristen Hagen and Donald Broom at the University of Cambridge, Holstein Friesian heifers were set a task, learning to press a panel to open a gate to a food reward at the end of a runway. Fact 8. The researchers measured their heart rates as they learned and compared them with cows who simply got the same food handed to them for free. The cows who solved the task themselves showed a spike of excitement, racing toward the reward, that the passively fed cows did not. Fact 9. Read that carefully. The excitement was not about the food, because both groups got food. It was about the solving. The cows appeared to feel a rush from working something out, from being in control of the outcome. That is the intellectual thrill you feel when a puzzle clicks. Fact 10. Scientists argue this eureka effect implies something profound. A basic sense of self-agency, of being the one who made the good thing happen. That is a building block of self-awareness, in an animal we call a dumb brute. Fact 11. Cows are good learners in general. They can be house-trained, taught to walk on a lead, taught to operate mechanisms, and in some studies they learn to press a button to release food or to activate a back-scratching brush, and used it eagerly. In a widely reported 2021 study, researchers even toilet-trained calves to use a designated latrine pen, nicknamed the Mulu, teaching them to associate the right spot with a reward. something many people would swear a cow could never grasp. Fact 12. They have excellent long-term memory. Cows remember locations, routes to food and water, and the layout of their territory, and they can recall this reliably over long periods. Fact 13. They can also learn to fear a specific place after a single bad experience there, and avoid it for a long time afterward, which is exactly the kind of one-shot learning that keeps a prey animal alive. Fact 14. Cows can distinguish individual humans by face, telling one person from another and reacting accordingly. To a cow, we are not an undifferentiated blur of people. We are individuals she recognizes. Fact 15. They recognize dozens of other cattle as individuals too, and maintain a complex web of relationships within the herd, knowing exactly who is who. Fact 16. And they navigate their social world with real subtlety, forming friendships, rivalries, and family bonds, and grooming their preferred partners far more than random herdmates. The herd is not a mob. It is a society. Cows can even handle surprisingly abstract tasks. In cognitive studies, they have learned to tell apart different shapes and patterns, to discriminate between individual human faces shown in photographs, and in some experiments to categorize images, work once assumed to be far beyond a grazing animal. And their spatial ability is excellent, letting them learn and remember complex routes through a landscape to reach food and water. Cows also appear to grasp object permanence, understanding that something hidden from view still exists, and they will search in the correct place for a reward they saw concealed. That is a cognitive milestone human infants only reach in their first year of life. Now let's talk about emotion, because a cow's inner life is richer and stranger than almost anyone assumes. Fact 17. Cows have distinct personalities. Within a herd, there are bold cows and shy cows, curious ones and anxious ones, sociable ones and loners, and these traits are stable and measurable over time. Fact 18. Those personalities even affect learning. Studies have found that a cow's temperament, how bold or fearful she is, influences how quickly and how well she solves cognitive tasks, exactly as it does in humans. Fact 19. Cows experience emotional contagion, catching moods from one another. Stress spreads through a herd, and so does calm. One frightened animal can set the others on edge, which is the raw material of empathy. Fact 20. They show signs of caring about each other's states, and mothers in particular are intensely responsive to the distress of their calves. Fact 21. And that maternal bond is powerful, and in modern farming, the source of real anguish. On dairy farms, calves are usually separated from their mothers very early, and both mother and calf may call repeatedly for one another for days. The cow's bellowing after separation is one of the more heartbreaking sounds in agriculture. Fact 22. Cows have been shown to experience something like optimism and pessimism. Using judgment bias tests, where an animal's response to an ambiguous cue reveals whether it expects good or bad outcomes, researchers found that a cow's emotional state colors how she interprets the world, just as a mood does in us. Fact 23. Calves raised in barren, isolated conditions tend to develop into more pessimistic, less flexible adults, while those raised with companions and stimulation cope better. Early life shapes a cow's outlook measurably. Fact 24. Cows play. Calves especially run, buck, kick up their heels, and gamble, and this exuberant play is a reliable sign of positive welfare, an animal that feels safe and well. Fact 25. There is a phenomenon farmers know well. When cattle are let out onto fresh spring pasture after a long winter indoors, they often leap and buck and gallop with what looks unmistakably like joy. It even has an informal name among farmers. Fact 26. Cows can be measurably content, and researchers have identified physiological and behavioral markers of positive emotion in cattle, from relaxed posture to specific ear positions, the same way it has been done in sheep. Fact 27. And they can suffer chronic negative states too. Cows in poor conditions show behavioral and physiological signs consistent with frustration, fear, and something resembling depression. The emotional range runs both ways.
Now to the body, because a cow's senses and biology are far stranger than the placid exterior suggests. Fact 28. Start with the fact that a cow does not really eat in the way you do. She is a ruminant, and her stomach has 4 chambers, the largest of which, the rumen, is a vast fermentation vat. Fact 29. That rumen holds tens of billions of microorganisms per milliliter, a teeming internal ecosystem of bacteria, protozoa, and fungi. The cow does not digest grass. Her microbes do, and she lives off what they produce. Fact 30. This partnership lets a cow do something no human can: extract a living from cellulose, the tough fiber in grass and leaves that our digestion cannot break down at all. The cow is a machine for turning inedible plants into meat and milk. Fact 31. To help the microbes, a cow regurgitates her partly digested food and chews it again, chewing the cud.
She spends around 8 hours a day doing this, and makes tens of thousands of chewing movements daily. Fact 32. A cow produces a staggering amount of saliva to buffer all that fermentation, in the region of 100 to nearly 200 liters a day. She is a chemical plant that has to constantly manage her own internal acidity. Fact 33. And she is a prolific producer of gas. Through belching, mostly, a single cow releases somewhere between 250 and 500 liters of methane every day, a byproduct of that fermentation, released mostly from the front end, in burps, not the end most people assume. Fact 34. This is why cattle are a serious climate issue. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, and with well over 1 billion cattle on the planet, their collective belching is a significant driver of global warming, which is why scientists are now racing to change what cows eat, adding seaweed and other supplements to cut the methane. Fact 35. A cow drinks enormous quantities of water, often around 150 liters a day for a dairy cow, roughly a bathtub, to fuel all that digestion and milk production. Fact 36. Now the senses, and the first surprise is smell. A cow's sense of smell is excellent, and she can detect scents including some odors and pheromones from kilometers away. Much of her world arrives through her nose. Fact 37. Every cow has a unique nose print. The pattern of ridges and grooves on a cow's muzzle is as individual as a human fingerprint, and it has genuinely been used to identify individual animals. Fact 38. A cow's hearing is acute and sensitive to a wider range of frequencies than ours, including higher pitches. She can hear things you cannot, which is part of why sudden high sounds spook cattle so easily. Fact 39. That sensitivity has a practical lesson behind it. The animal scientist Temple Grandin transformed the handling of cattle by recognizing that they are acutely bothered by high-pitched noise, sudden movement, shadows, and contrast, and redesigning facilities around how a cow actually perceives the world. Fact 40. A cow's eyes give her panoramic vision, close to a full circle of around 300 degrees, because her eyes sit on the sides of her head. She can see nearly all the way around herself without turning. Fact 41. But she has a blind spot directly behind her, and poor depth perception straight ahead, which is why approaching a cow from directly behind startles her, and why cattle balk at shadows and changes in flooring they cannot judge. Fact 42. Cows are not colorblind, but they see color differently from us, with reduced sensitivity to red, which demolishes the most famous myth about them and their cousins. Fact 43. The bull in the bull ring is not enraged by the color red. Bulls are effectively red blind. What provokes a charge is the movement of the cape, not its color. The red is for the human audience, not the bull. Fact 44. Here is one almost nobody knows. Cattle tend to align their bodies along the north-south axis of the Earth's magnetic field while grazing and resting. Researchers led by Sabine Begal discovered this in 2008, published in the journal PNAS, by analyzing thousands of cattle and satellite images on Google Earth, a study you could in principle repeat yourself from your sofa. Fact 45. The study covered over 8,000 cattle across the globe, and found this north-south tendency held regardless of wind or sun, pointing to the magnetic field as the cue. Herders had stood among cattle for millennia and never noticed. Fact 46. I will be honest that this one is debated. Another lab failed to replicate it, and the effect remains contested. But it is a real, published, striking claim, and further studies have supported it, suggesting cows may have a magnetic sense we are only beginning to understand. Fact 47. Cows are strong, and much faster than they look. A cow can run at around 40 kilometers an hour in a sprint, faster than the fastest human, and they are surprisingly agile for their bulk.
Fact 48.
They can also swim, and will cross rivers and even swim considerable distances when they need to, their large bodies floating well. Fact 49. A cow's normal body temperature runs a little higher than ours, around 38.5 degrees Celsius, and her heart beats roughly 60 to 70 times a minute at rest, similar to a human's. Fact 50. Cattle sleep far less than you would guess, only around 4 hours a day of actual sleep, though they rest and doze far longer, and much of their downtime is spent lying down ruminating rather than truly asleep. Fact 51. And they dream. Cattle experience REM sleep, the sleep stage associated with dreaming, so it is entirely likely that a sleeping cow is dreaming of something. Fact 52.
Cows generally lie down and stand up in a distinctive, deliberate sequence. Hindquarters first when rising, and they strongly prefer soft, dry surfaces, choosing comfortable bedding when given the option. Comfort matters to them. Now the family and the wild origins, because the gentle cow has a monstrous ancestor. Fact 53. Every domestic cow on Earth descends from a wild animal called the aurochs, and it was terrifying. Aurochs bulls stood up to around 180 centimeters at the shoulder, far bigger than most modern cattle, with long, forward curving horns. Fact 54. The aurochs was powerful, aggressive, and fast, an animal that commanded the respect of every predator, including early humans, who painted it on cave walls tens of thousands of years ago. This is the beast we turned into a milk cow. Fact 55. Humans domesticated cattle from the aurochs roughly 10,500 years ago in the Near East, in one of the most consequential decisions our species ever made. Fact 56. Genetic evidence suggests that a large share of the world's touring cattle may trace back to a surprisingly small founding population of wild aurochs, perhaps only a modest number of animals, tamed and bred by early farmers. Fact 57. The wild aurochs itself did not survive. Hunted and squeezed out of its habitat, the species dwindled until the very last one died in 1627, in a forest in Poland. We domesticated the aurochs and then let the original go extinct. Fact 58. So the aurochs now exists only inside the cow. The genes of that great wild animal are scattered through the billion-plus cattle alive today, and there are actual scientific projects trying to breed cattle back toward the aurochs, to resurrect the ancestor from its descendants. Fact 59. Cattle come in over 1,000 distinct breeds, shaped by us, for milk, for meat, for pulling plows, for surviving heat, cold, drought, and altitude. From one wild animal, an entire spectrum. Fact 60. They range from tiny miniature breeds to giants like the Chianina, one of the oldest and largest cattle breeds, whose bulls can approach 2 meters at the shoulder and weigh well over a ton, echoing their aurochs ancestry. Fact 61. There are around 1 to 1.5 billion cattle on Earth, making them one of the most numerous large mammals on the planet, and by some counts, among the top handful of most numerous mammals of any kind. Fact 62. Their bodies come with natural weaponry. Both cows and bulls can grow horns, which are living structures with a bony core and a blood supply, not dead like antlers, and they are used for defense and to establish rank. Fact 63. Cattle have a strict social hierarchy, a pecking order, and they largely settle disputes through posturing, threat displays, and shoving rather than serious fighting. precisely because everyone already knows their place. Now the part where the cow reached into our own biology and changed it. Fact 64. Here is a fact that should stop you. The cow did not just feed humanity. It rewrote human DNA. Milk is the reason.
Fact 65. Almost all mammals, including ancestral humans, lose the ability to digest lactose, the sugar in milk, after infancy. The gene that produces the enzyme lactase switches off after weaning, because in nature no adult ever drinks milk. Fact 66. But once humans domesticated cattle and had a constant supply of milk, a mutation that kept the lactase gene switched on into adulthood became hugely advantageous. People who could drink milk without getting sick had an extra, reliable, year-round source of calories, protein, fat, and clean liquid. Fact 67. That mutation, called lactase persistence, spread through dairying populations with astonishing speed over just a few thousand years. It is one of the strongest and fastest examples of recent natural selection in the entire human genome, so sharp that geneticists use it as a textbook case of evolution driven by culture. Fact 68. Think about what that means. A domesticated animal changed the genes of the species that domesticated it. The cow is quite literally written into the DNA of billions of living people. If you can drink milk as an adult, that is, the cow's fingerprint inside your own body. Fact 69. And the trait evolved more than once, independently, in different dairying cultures in Europe and Africa, a textbook case of convergent evolution, all driven by the same animal. Fact 70. The cow may also have helped invent money. Cattle were one of the earliest and most important forms of wealth and exchange in human history, a walking, breeding store of value. Fact 71. The link is buried in our language. The English word cattle shares its root with chattel and with capital, all coming from the same origin meaning movable property. To early societies, cattle were capital, in the most literal sense. Fact 72. The Latin word for money, pecunia, comes from pecus, meaning cattle or livestock. The words pecuniary and impecunious carry that ancient herd inside them. When you talk about money, you are etymologically talking about cows. Fact 73. Cattle have been used as a unit of wealth, a bride price, a measure of a person's status, and a form of sacrifice across countless cultures for thousands of years. For much of human history, to be rich was, quite simply, to have cows. Fact 74. Cattle were also engines, not just food. For millennia, oxen, castrated male cattle trained to work, were the primary source of heavy pulling power in agriculture, dragging plows and carts and turning mills. Fact 75. It is not an exaggeration to say oxen helped build civilization. Before engines, the muscle that broke the soil for most of the world's crops was very often bovine. The cow and its kin quite literally plowed the fields that fed the rise of cities. Fact 76. In several cultures, the cow became sacred, most famously in Hinduism, where it is revered as a symbol of life, nonviolence, and generosity, honored rather than eaten. Few animals occupy so central a place in human belief. Now let's return to the animal itself and the daily life we overlook. Fact 77. Cows are highly vocal and communicate through a rich range of sounds. Research has found that individual cows have distinctive voices, and that mothers and calves recognize each other by voice. Fact 78. A 2019 study from the University of Sydney analyzing hundreds of cattle vocalizations found that cows keep their individual voice identity across different emotional states, and that the calls carry information about how the animal is feeling, positive or negative. It was the first solid evidence that cattle broadcast their emotions in their voices and hold on to a personal vocal signature throughout life. Fact 79. In other words, cows have something like individual voices and are broadcasting their emotional state when they moo. That endless lowing in a field is not noise. It is a conversation we have never bothered to learn. Fact 80. Mothers and calves communicate with quiet, low, private calls when close together, and switch to louder, higher calls across distance, adjusting their voice to the situation exactly as you would. Fact 81. Cows also communicate through body language and, notably, through the eyes and ears. And researchers can read a cow's emotional state partly from the position of her ears, a drooping, relaxed ear signaling calm. Fact 82. The white of a cow's eye becomes more visible when she is stressed or frightened, another readable signal of her inner state, if you know to look for it. Fact 83. Cows are creatures of habit and routine, and they find comfort in predictability. Disruptions to their schedule, their order of milking, or their social group cause measurable stress and can even reduce milk yield. Fact 84. That link between emotion and milk is direct and well documented. A calm, contented cow with low stress produces more milk. Studies have even found that cows given names and treated as individuals yield more than anonymous ones. Kindness is, measurably, productive. Fact 85. A cow must be pregnant or have recently given birth to produce milk, like any mammal. The image of the cow as an endless milk fountain hides the fact that dairy production depends on a continuous cycle of pregnancy and birth. Fact 86. A cow's udder can hold and produce a remarkable volume, and modern high-yield dairy cows have been bred to produce far more milk than a calf could ever drink, in some cases well over 40 liters a day, a huge metabolic strain on the animal. Fact 87. Calves are precocious. A newborn calf can stand and walk within an hour or two of birth, and will nurse almost immediately, because in the wild a calf that cannot keep up with the herd does not survive. Fact 88. Cattle groom each other, licking one another in a behavior called allogrooming, which reinforces social bonds and tends to be directed at preferred partners, their friends, again. Fact 89. A cow can live a long time when allowed to. Cattle can reach 20 years of age or more, and there are records of cows living into their late 20s. Most, of course, do not get anywhere near that. Fact 90. And that is the quiet, uncomfortable arithmetic behind the animal. A creature capable of 2 decades of life, with best friends, grudges, joy, and a magnetic sense, is in the dairy industry typically productive for only around 5 or 6 years before being culled. The gap between the animal's capacity and its lifespan is enormous. Fact 91. Cows are genuinely gentle with humans, given the chance. Despite their size and power, cattle raised with calm, kind handling become trusting and affectionate, and many enjoy being scratched and stroked, leaning into it like a dog. Fact 92. This is real enough that cow cuddling has become a recognized form of animal-assisted therapy, with people paying to sit with and embrace cattle for stress relief, drawn to the animal's warmth, slow heartbeat, and calm presence. Fact 93. Cows form attachments to individual humans too, recognizing and greeting a familiar carer, following them, and showing clear preferences for people who treat them well. Fact 94. They are curious animals. Introduce a novel object into a field, and cattle will cautiously approach and investigate it. And this curiosity is another marker of an engaged, intelligent mind, rather than a blank one. Fact 95.
Cattle can learn from watching each other, a form of social learning, so that a useful behavior discovered by one animal, like operating a water dispenser, can spread through the herd. Fact 96. Given control over their own environment, cows use it. In studies where cattle could operate mechanized brushes or trigger their own feed, they engaged with these systems enthusiastically, showing they value agency over their surroundings. Fact 97. For all we have bred into them, cattle retain their wild instincts. Frightened cattle instinctively bunch together for safety, and a threatened herd may form a defensive ring around its calves, horns outward, a behavior inherited straight from the aurochs. Fact 98. So consider the full weight of what this animal is.
It descends from a monster we feared. It can outrun us. It aligns with the planet's magnetic field. It feels joy at solving a puzzle. It grieves for its calves, and it changed the DNA of our entire species. And we call it dull. Fact 99. The truth is that the cow may be the animal we most completely fail to see. Not because there is little there, but because there is so much, standing so still, that we stopped looking a very long time ago. Familiarity did what strangeness never could. It made us blind. Fact 100. There is a lesson in the cow that outlasts the cow. Being overlooked has nothing to do with being simple. The most familiar animal in the field, the one we drive past without a glance, turns out to have a best friend, a memory, a mood, and a place woven right through our language, our history, and our blood. She was never blank. We just stopped asking 10,000 years ago and never started again.
So the next time you pass a cow standing quietly in a field, understand that you are not looking at an empty thing turning grass into milk. You are looking at a social, emotional, intelligent animal, descended from a giant, who is very likely aware of you, remembers how she has been treated, and is aligned, at this exact moment, with the magnetic field of the earth, in a field you would have driven straight past. Here is what I want from you. Tell me the animal you have always assumed was stupid, the boring one you would scroll straight past, the one you would never in 100 years have clicked on, and let me prove you wrong about it too. Drop it below, and be specific. And if you would rather see the real version of the world than the version we were handed, you already know what the subscribe button is for. The next overlooked animal is coming soon.